G'day all, it's Colin from PCTLC and thanks for joining me. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to remove your Linux distro from your Windows as a dual boot. So if you want to remove the dual boot and just have Windows only because you've decided you didn't want Linux, then we're going to have a look at how to do that. So in this video, we'll be covering some steps that can be quite risky and if not successful could probably prevent your computer from booting. So you got to understand that there are a certain amount of risks involved in doing this. I'm doing it in VirtualBox. I've done the research and it looks like this is the best way to go. But you do need to understand if you're going to move forward with this, there is a possibility that if it doesn't work for you, then your computer may not boot. Now, the only other way, if that happens and you cannot find a solution, you can use a Linux live disk to back up all your documents and pictures and all your home folders, which you should do anyway before you even consider doing this. You should have backups of everything just in case, because then you may have to reinstall Windows if it doesn't go to plan. So that's the worst case scenario. So just please be aware that there are certain risks involved before you even move forward with this procedure, removing your dual boot of Linux with Windows. But I can't stress enough, please make sure that you have backups in place before doing anything like this. First of all, we need to be in Windows. So I found a web page, How To Geek. I've been to their web pages quite a few times. Now, what they're showing here is probably the obvious, which is what I would have done anyway, which is delete the Linux partitions from disk management. So that's what we're going to do first. So the first thing you really need to do is you really need to back up. You need a recovery disk to be able to do this. Recovery. Create a recovery drive. So we go next. I believe you probably could do this onto a USB. Let's just check out what it does here. So what it's asking here is to connect a USB flash drive, which is what it will be looking for. So the drive must be able to hold at least 8 gigabytes and everything on the drive will be deleted. So if you have a USB connected, then you'll be looking at this screen here. Available drives will be the USB drive, and then you can click next and it'll make a recovery drive. So that's the first thing you need to do before you go ahead with any dual boot removal solution. So I'll cancel that. Now I'm going to check if there's a way of doing this without needing a recovery disk. I'm not sure whether we can do that. So we right click the start menu and choose disk management. Okay, so in disk management, we are looking for our Linux partitions. Now, the Linux partitions here will be identified with no file system. And I do know that they were number 5 and number 6. Got an NTFS there. Now, I'm pretty sure Linux was disk 5 and 6. Now, you've got to be very careful here. So these three here would be Windows, and the following ones, EFI system, would be Linux, and the 70 gig there would be Linux as well. Now it's saying Windows is 89 gig, so what we can do is we open up our File Explorer and check the partition size of Windows is 70 gigs free of 89 gig. So the 89 gig is Windows. This second partition would be system, some sort of system file. Oh, there we go, we've got more information there. It's an EFI system. That's an EFI system, 100 megabytes. For Linux we made 512, so that's the obvious Linux one there, and it doesn't have a file system tagged to it. Neither does the Windows one there, but we know that Linux was 5 and 6. And NTFS is there. So the NTFS are two obvious Windows partitions. That's the recovery there. And this one here is definitely an EFI. So we've got two EFIs. Windows is only 100 megabytes. Our Linux one is 512, so that's the Linux one there. Now, if you are unsure, what we've got here is 5 and 6. If you're very unsure of which ones you are deleting, let's do a restart. So let's go into Linux Mint and we do some research before we start deleting any partitions at all. Now I've installed gparted. Gparted is not installed after it's there in the live disk, but it's not there after install. So you can easily install gparted. You can install it from software. I'm pretty sure it's in software, gparted. And there's gparted. Now, sometimes if you install with the terminal, which is what I did, it can show up in the software center. So sudo apt install gparted. That's what I did. Or you can go to software center. I don't know if it shows up before you install it from terminal. Now we can get a better look here at the system, gparted. That's our boot ESP. ext4, so see the file system, it shows you what it is. Under Linux it's ext4, which is number, and FAT32, so that's our 512. And Windows boot EFI is only 100 megabytes, so that's a telltale sign that that's a boot partition for Windows. So you've got NTFS, FAT32, Microsoft reserved unknown, and NTFS. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So in Windows, they separate these. One shows down the bottom here. So we're interested in partition 5 and 6. So number 5 and 6 are the two Linux ones there. So let's go back into Windows. Okay, so let's right click the start menu and go to disk management. So we're back in disk management and we need to delete 5 and 6. So you get, so one very important thing you got to remember is Windows is booting because it's relying on Linux, the Linux boot menu to boot Windows. So this is where the problem will be. That's why you need the recovery disk. So if we delete, if we right click, we can delete this volume, but it won't allow us to delete this one. Maybe we need to delete 6 first. So let's delete that volume. It was not created by Windows and may contain data recognized by the, yep, so let's delete that. So now we've got some unallocated space. And now that number 6 becomes number 5. And looks like we cannot delete this one here. Okay, for some reason it's not letting me delete the EFI system partition. Don't know whether we need to unmount that because that's probably being used to boot this Windows system. So it looks like we're going to have to use a command line situation here. So what we're going to do is hold down the Windows key and press the R key to bring up a run command, and we're going to type disk part and yes, we'll allow this app to do that, and we're going to list disk. So the disk 0 is the one we need, so we're going to select disk 0. Disk 0 is now the selected disk. Then we need to list partition, and there's the partitions. So you can clearly see there that the partition number 5 is 488 megabytes. So what we're going to do is select partition 5. Partition 5 is now the selected partition, and we're going to delete partition override. Now you can see that that partition has been deleted. So we've deleted that. Unfortunately, that's the only way we could do it. I will put the, I'll put this in the show notes, the link to this website here. That's just a nice little way of, that's the only way we could delete that EFI partition from Windows. So that's the only way I could figure it out. The graphical wouldn't let us do it. So this part successfully deleted, and we type exit, and that's done. So now what you see, we didn't have the option to extend volume before, but now we've got the unallocated space. We can extend this volume and make this part of Windows again, and that'll extend your volume, or you can use this as a new partition. So that can be a separate partition to your Windows environment, which sometimes can be a good idea because it's separate from the system. But if you wanted to add your space back into your Windows, we can extend the volume. So select the amount we want. We'll take the whole lot. And next, this selected 72,176 megabytes, which is 72 gig, which is probably this one here, and finish. And now we've got all of the available space back into Windows. So that's done. Now we have the situation where we need to reboot Windows. Now, there is one way to get into recovery, is when you do a restart, if you hold the shift key down, it'll go into recovery. So if I hold the shift key down now and press restart. Now, whether that brings us into the recovery or not, it may not, because we've deleted the EFI of Linux, but it has. So we can troubleshoot advanced options, and we need to go to a command prompt. So we are in the command prompt. So what we need to do now is type boot recovery.exe space /fix mbr. Enter that. Okay, so it's not possible to do it from that, so we need the recovery disk. So we need to shut down. So I'll just do a shutdown here. You could hold your, if you're in a on a real computer, you could just hold down the power button till it shuts down. And now what we'll do is we'll boot back up. We probably have no boot at all, so we're just gone straight to grub. So I have to shut down again. Now, if you're on real hardware, you'd have to either hit escape to bring up a boot menu, or F12, F8, any of those boot menus, or go into the BIOS and look for the USB and select that as the first boot option. That's another way you can do it. So what I'm going to have to do now is attach. So in this situation, I'm going to have to go to my settings of my virtual machine and storage, and I'm going to have to add the Windows 10 back in there and boot up Windows 10. Now when I start, I'm going to have to hold down the right control key and hit escape and get that boot manager there. So boot manager, Windows UEFI VBox, I think it's the one, CD-ROM, which will be the press any key to start. So this is the same as installing Windows again. So we're running the Windows installation disk. In my case, it's an image. I don't know whether we need to select the correct things here, but we'll do that anyway, just to be sure. US keyboard, next. So we need to repair your computer. That's what we need to do. And then troubleshoot, command prompt, and we need to type in boot recovery.exe /fix mbr. This operation completed successfully. All right, so let's quit the install. Let's turn off PC. And what I'm going to do is make sure that the disk is removed, so we're not booting with the Windows 10 disk, which is this one here. I'll remove that. Okay, and theoretically we should be able to boot back into Windows, and we're not. So let's just check this website here to make sure I am doing everything correctly. On the advanced options, select the command prompt. Command prompt, yep. At the command prompt, type the following command and then press enter, which is what we did. You can now restart your computer. It will boot from its hard drive. That's not happening, is it? We repaired computer. Troubleshoot, command prompt. We're going to try another one. Scan OS. Identified as 0. US keyboard. Repair the computer. Troubleshoot, command prompt. Disk part. List disk. Select disk 0. List volume. Select volume 3. So we're going to assign letter K. So I think the problem here is if we list the volume, this is the boot partition here, the EFI, I believe. It's actually hidden. I think this is the problem. So we're going to, we've selected volume 3. So we listed volume, select volume 3, this one here. Assign letter K. Enter that. Successfully assigned the drive letter or mount point. So we're going to exit that. So now we're going to cd /d k space / EFI / Microsoft / boot / Enter that. Microsoft boot. I missed the O. Okay, so I had a space there. There's meant to be no space after the K. So what we need to do now is boot rec space / fix boot. So we'll try fix MBR. Rename BCD .bak as a backup. BCD boot C / Windows space /L space ENUS space /S space K space /F all. Okay. Rebuild BCD. Okay. Now we've got Windows booting. Now, as you can see, that was an absolute mess. Oh boy. So we have successfully managed to get Windows to boot again. So I might put this part down as a success. So there you have it. We have Windows 10 booting again, but it is not an easy task if things don't work to plan. And the problem here is because you've got a Linux EFI system boot, which you cannot delete in disk management in Windows, you have to use the command prompt. And then you have to use the command prompt again with the recovery disk. So it's not really an easy task, but this was something that somebody was asking about. So now that I've shown you how that's done, and that's probably the worst case scenario, because we were using 2 different EFI partitions, that may be why this was so much harder. Legacy might be easier because the bootloader is within the Linux partition. EFI, there's 2 separate EFI partitions, so that's a lot harder to remove. And they do talk to each other. Linux is talking to the Windows one, so it's overridden the Windows EFI partition. That's probably why it makes it a lot harder. In Legacy, I would have to think that it's a lot easier to do. I hope this video helps somebody because it was requested by a viewer. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it interesting and informative, and thanks for watching.